Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, the Deputy High Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pride that I welcome you all to the first session of this open-ended intergovernmental working group, which was established by Human Rights Council Resolution 56-5 and is entitled Open-Ended Intergovernmental Working Group on an Optional Protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. On the rights of the child for early childhood education, free pre-primary and free secondary education. I would like to thank the member states, the sponsoring delegations including Luxembourg, the Dominican Republic, Armenia, Bulgaria, Colombia, Cyprus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Nauru, Panama, Romania, and my own country, Sierra Leone. And indeed, the Human Rights Council for entrusting me with the responsibility of serving as chair-rapporteur for this important process. The Human Rights Council's resolution adopted in 2024 clearly demonstrates the global recognition of the importance of early childhood education and free pre-primary and secondary education. The resolution provides an inclusive platform to explore, develop, and potentially adopt a new optional protocol that reaffirms and strengthens children's rights to education. It is my pleasure to provide an overview of the Human Rights Council Resolution 56-5, by which the Council decided to establish this open-ended intergovernmental working group. The Council reaffirmed these universal rights to education as set out in International Human Rights Instrument and emphasized its transformative role in empowering girls, promoting equality and advancing sustainable development and social inclusion. However, it also expressed deep concern that millions of children worldwide are still excluded from education, most acutely at pre-primary and secondary levels due to financial and systemic barriers. In response to these challenges, the Council established this working group, which has been mandated to explore, develop, and submit a draft optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child for consideration. Such an instrument would, first, explicitly recognize that the right to education includes early childhood care and education. It will require states to provide at least 1 year free, accessible public pre-primary education. Require states to ensure that public secondary education is free and accessible to all. It will recall the obligation of states to promote and encourage international cooperation in matters relating to education. And of course, it will streamline reporting obligation under the Convention to avoid placing additional burdens on states parties. The working group is mandated to meet here in Geneva, where we're now meeting, for 5 working days in a hybrid format before the end of 2025, which sessions dedicated to constructively deliberate on the future optional protocol. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights will provide the necessary support, and the Human Rights Council has requested that the special attention be given to ensuring meaningful participation of children and that their views are heard in an ethical, safe, and inclusive manner. Provisions are also in place to ensure accessibility for children and persons with disabilities. The Council has invited the Committee on the Rights of the Child, relevant special procedure mandate holders, independent experts, member states, civil society groups, educators, parents, and guardians to actively contribute to this process. Finally, the working group has been requested to submit a progress report to the Human Rights Council not later than its 62nd session. This report is also to be made accessible and available in a child-friendly fashion. Excellencies and colleagues, these resolutions make a significant step towards strengthening the legal framework for the rights to education under the Convention on the Rights of the Child. As entrusted to this working group, our task is to constructively and inclusively deliberate on a possible new optional protocol that would enshrine the rights of every child to free pre-primary and secondary education. In doing so, we must place children's voices and perspective at the center and at the heart of our discussions. However, we are mindful of the concerns raised by states during the negotiation process. Some question the necessity of an optional protocol, citing existing international standards such as the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and all the relevant other instruments. Others highlighted the risk of setting a precedent with multiple options, protocols, or emphasized their resource and capacity constraints, particularly in light of the United Nations' current financial situation. Some called for greater recognition of the role of parents and guardians in children's education. Rather than viewing these concerns as obstacles, we must view them as opportunities for constructive engagement. Our task is to ensure that this working group takes a balanced approach that respects states' sovereignty, recognizes their diverse perspective, and ultimately advances every child's fundamental right to a quality education. What is more important, this process must also guarantee the genuine and meaningful participation of children. The Children's Panel must avoid tokenism and recognize that their insights are valuable as those of governments, experts, and civil society. Children's voices must be heard and actively influence our discussions and decisions. After all, they are the primary beneficiary of this process. Resolution 56.5 addresses a clear and pressing issue: the recognition of gaps in the international legal framework regarding the right to education. Although the Convention on the Rights of the Child recognizes the right to free and compulsory primary education, it does not explicitly extend these entitlements to early childhood care and education, or to pre-primary and secondary levels. These omissions mean that millions of children, especially those most vulnerable, are excluded from the promise of a guaranteed and rights-based education. The recent UNESCO and UNICEF global report on early childhood care and education, the right to a strong foundation, reinforces this. It shows that nearly 60% of children in low-income countries lack access to early learning opportunities, and that the world is off track to achieve SDG Target 4.2. Persistent inequalities mean that children from poorest households and those with disabilities are far less likely to attend ECCE. The report calls for urgent action, including increased investment, stronger policy frameworks, support for parents and caregivers, professionalism of educators, and the development of a binding global framework that explicitly recognizes ECC as a right. In carrying out our work, I would like to emphasize that this initiative will not duplicate existing instruments. Instead, it will complement and reinforce the Convention and other international commitments, ensuring that the right to education is inclusive, comprehensive, and responsive to the needs of today's children. However, we cannot ignore the broader context. The United Nations is experiencing a profound liquidity crisis, affecting programs and processes across the organization. This reality requires us as member states to conduct our deliberations with even greater prudence, innovation, and efficiency. Financial constraints should not diminish our ambition, but rather sharpen our focus on achieving practical and sustainable outcome. At the same time, we recognize that education ultimately hinges on political will. Political leadership has the power to transform commitments into classrooms, policies into opportunities, and words on paper into lived reality of children everywhere. It is therefore imperative that we approach this process with the spirit of consensus building. A successful outcome will depend not only on the strength of our legal drafting, but also on our ability to establish collective ownership and shared sense of purpose. A key part of our mandate will involve examining mechanisms and initiatives that enable states to fund education sustainably at the national level. There are many options available, from innovative financing to domestic resource mobilization and strengthening international cooperation. However, these must be equitable and inclusive. Particular attention must be given to persistent gender gap in education. In many parts of the world, girls face barriers ranging from discriminatory practices to safety concerns and early marriage. Ensuring girls have access to education is not only a matter of fairness, but also a moral and developmental imperative. Excellencies, allow me to highlight Sierra Leone's leadership in this area. The launch of the Free Quality Education School program in 2018 and the subsequent legislative measures guaranteeing the rights to free education from primary to secondary levels have set a powerful example. Sierra Leone has shown that even in environments with limited resources, bold political leadership can increase access and remove barriers and establish education as a basic right for all children. As we begin our deliberations today, let us commit to building on this kind of leadership and working in the same spirit. I encourage delegations to engage constructively and to listen to one another, remembering that children whose future depend on the choices we make here are at the heart of this process. I look forward to our collective efforts to charting a path together towards an outcome that will stand as a legacy of this Council's commitment to children's rights. And I thank you very much, Excellencies and colleagues.